Welcome back, deep divers. Ready to plunge into some new material.
Always excited to see where these deep dives take us.
Today we're shifting gears a bit. We're going to be exploring um, a novel you, the listener, suggested.
A fictional deep dive sounds intriguing.
It is. It's called La Vita Va Avanti.
Life goes on.
That's right. And it's not your typical feel-good story. It tackles some, well, pretty heavy themes: life, death, and, well, what might come after.
All set in a cemetery.
Exactly. A cemetery in Italy, actually.
And I understand the cemetery is quite vividly described in the book.
Oh, absolutely. The author, Vito Ferro, really paints a picture with his words. But the setting isn't just about atmosphere. It's actually, it's central to the whole premise of the book.
Which is?
That when people die, their spirits remain trapped within the cemetery
They
wall.
become ghosts, unable to move on.
Yeah, but they're not your typical Halloween ghosts, spooky and scary. These ghosts retain their memories, their personalities, even their regrets.
Fascinating. So it's like they're caught between two worlds. Not quite alive, but not quite gone either.
Right, and that creates this really interesting tension in the story.
Yeah.
So, who are some of these ghosts we meet?
Well, we have Armando Patella. He's our protagonist. A young guy, an aspiring writer.
And he died how?
In a car accident.
Tragic.
It is. And throughout the novel, we learn that his death wasn't exactly straightforward.
There's more to the story.
There is. We eventually find out that he was driving the car when the accident happened.
Oh, wow. And was he alone in the car?
He was with his girlfriend, Chiara, and it's hinted that he blames himself for what happened.
So not only is he dealing with being dead, but he's carrying this heavy guilt, too.
Exactly. And that guilt plays a major role in his interactions with the other ghosts, like Alessio, for instance.
Alessio.
He's this older ghost, sort of acts as Armando's guide in this new afterlife.
So like a mentor figure.
Yeah, something like that. He's been a ghost for a while, seems to have accepted his fate, found a kind of peace in the cemetery.
Interesting. So while Armando is struggling, Alessio is more at peace.
Right. And then there's Filippo. Now, he's an interesting case.
How so?
He died in the 1980s.
Wow, so he's been a ghost for quite some time.
Yeah. And, his world stopped in the 80s.
So he's completely out of touch with everything that's happened since then.
Totally. But he's obsessed with one thing: soccer. Specifically, the Juventus soccer team.
Oh, I love that detail. It's so human, Even in death, he's still passionate about his team.
It really highlights how our passions, our interests, they can stay with us, even when everything else changes.
Absolutely. Okay, so we have Armando, Alessio, and Filippo. Any other notable ghosts we should know about?
Well, there's Salvatore. He's deeply in love with his deceased wife, Rosa.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah. Initially, he's overjoyed to be reunited with her in the cemetery.
Makes sense. They're together again.
But their story takes a bit of a darker turn as the novel progresses. Their relationship, even in death, isn't all sunshine and roses, let's just say that.
Ah, so there's more to their story than meets the eye. I see. And then there's this priest, right?
Dom Barbero, a rather sinister character. He's a ghost, too.
A ghost priest. Now that's interesting.
He preaches about the importance of accepting death and severing ties with the living world. But there's a sense that he might not be practicing what he preaches.
You're saying he's a hypocrite?
Possibly. He seems to be manipulating the other ghosts, preying on their vulnerabilities, and there are hints that he too has some unresolved issues, some regrets he's clinging to.
So we got a whole cast of complex characters all grappling with their own post-death baggage.
Exactly. And then into this world of ghosts walks a living person, Francesca Scornavacca.
Wait, a living person who can interact with the ghosts?
That's right. She can see them, hear them, talk to them.
How is that possible?
The novel doesn't really explain it, but Francesca is drawn to the cemetery to visit her estranged husband's grave.
Oh, so there's a connection there. She's grieving, seeking solace, maybe?
Perhaps. But at first, she's terrified by these ghostly encounters.
I can imagine. It would be pretty unnerving to suddenly be able to see and hear the dead.
But as the story unfolds, Francesca becomes a crucial character. She starts to act as a kind of bridge between the living and the dead.
Okay, so she can communicate with both worlds. What does that lead to?
Well, it sets off a chain of events, some of them quite unexpected. Her attempts to help the ghosts connect with the living world to find some kind of closure, Well, they have consequences.
Unintended consequences.
You could say that. It raises questions about whether we're meant to interfere in this way, whether there's a natural order to things that we shouldn't, disrupt.
Right. And then things really take a dramatic turn when grave robbers break into the cemetery.
That scene is intense. Armando, in particular, is furious. He tries to stop them, but of course he's powerless.
He's a ghost. He can't physically intervene.
Exactly. And that realization is a turning point for him. It forces him to confront the limitations of his existence, the reality of his death. It really shakes him to his core. And in that moment of chaos and rage, something happens.
He remembers.
Yeah, he finally remembers the details of the accident, how it happened, his role in it. And it all comes rushing back. The guilt, the fear, the love he felt for Chiara.
It's a breakthrough, isn't it?
Yeah.
After all this time, he finally confronts the truth of that night.
It is. And it's a painful truth. But it's also a liberating one. Because once he fully faces it, once he acknowledges the depth of his love for Chiara, something shifts for him.
What do you mean?
He starts to fade away.
He disappears.
It's not explicitly stated, but that's the implication. He kind of dissolves into the cemetery like he's finally found peace,
Wow, that's powerful. It leaves a lot open to interpretation, doesn't it? Like, what does it actually mean for him to fade away? Did he move on to some other realm, or did he simply cease to exist?
Right. And that's where the novel really gets you thinking, doesn't it? About what happens after death, what it means to find peace. Is it about letting go of regrets, accepting responsibility, or is it something else entirely?
So many questions, so
Yeah.
few answers. I guess that's part of what makes this story so compelling. It doesn't give us all the answers. It lets us, the readers, grapple with those big questions ourselves.
Right. It invites us to bring our own beliefs and experiences to the table. So what about the other ghosts? Do they all fade away too?
That's what I was wondering. What happens to Alessio Filippo and the others?
Well, Filippo's story is particularly interesting. He's so fixated on the past, on his beloved Juventus team. And after Armando fades away, Filippo has a moment of realization. He sees that life, or at least the things we care about, continue on even after we're gone.
Juventus is still playing, still winning, even though Filippo is stuck in the 1980s.
Exactly. And that realization, it's both comforting and heartbreaking, It's like he finds a strange kind of solace in knowing that his passion, his team, lives on, even if he can't experience it directly anymore.
Almost like he's living vicariously through them.
Yeah. And it speaks to this human need for connection, for something that transcends our individual lives.
Even in death, we seek meaning, purpose. And what about Francesca? What happens to the living person who can see and hear the ghosts?
Well, she has this final encounter with the cemetery caretaker. And it's a brief scene, but it's really chilling. He kind of acknowledges her ability, to see the ghosts. And he implies that it's a rare gift, not something to be taken lightly.
Almost like a warning.
Yeah, like she's treading on dangerous ground by interacting with the dead. Like there are boundaries that shouldn't be crossed.
And then there's that line from the novel, the one we mentioned earlier. Life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans.
Right. It takes on a whole new meaning in the context of this story, doesn't it? It's like a reminder to appreciate the present moment, to savor life while we have it, because it can be fleeting and unpredictable.
It's a powerful message. And I think it really encapsulates the essence of this novel, don't you?
Definitely. It's about life and death, loss and acceptance, and the ways we try to make sense of it all.
And the way it uses this cemetery setting, it's so brilliant. It becomes this liminal space where the boundaries between the living and the dead blur, and we're forced to confront our own mortality.
Exactly. It's not a comfortable read, but it's a deeply thought-provoking one. So as we wrap up this deep dive into La Vita Va Avanti, we want to leave you with a question. If you were in Francesca's shoes, how would you react to the reality of these ghosts? Would you be afraid? Or would you embrace the chance to connect with loved ones who have passed on?
It's a tough question. It really gets to the heart of our anxieties and curiosities about death, right? Do we really want to know what happens after we die? Or is it better to just let that remain a mystery?
And this novel, La Vita Va Avanti, it doesn't just ask those questions. It throws us right into a world where those boundaries between life and death, they become almost tangible.
Yeah.
We experience it through the eyes of the ghosts, through Armando's yearning, Filippo's innocence, Salvatore's heartbreak, and even through Francesca's fear and compassion.
What I find really striking is how the novel doesn't try to wrap everything up neatly. It doesn't offer any easy answers. It's messy, it's complicated, just like life itself.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes it so powerful.
Absolutely. It doesn't shy away from the ambiguity, the uncertainty of it all. And in the end, it leaves us with, well, probably more questions than answers. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, is it?
Sometimes the best stories are the ones that make us think, that challenge our assumptions and leave us wanting more.
Right. They spark those conversations that stay with us long after we've finished reading, or in this case, listening.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into La Vita va avanti, we want to encourage you to keep exploring those questions. Pick up the novel, give it a read, and see what resonates with you.
Think about the characters, the themes, the ideas that stuck with you. What are your own beliefs about the afterlife? How do you make sense of death and loss in your own life?
And as you go about your day, remember that line, life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans.
A reminder to cherish the present moment, to be fully present in our lives, because you never know what tomorrow might bring.
Until next time, keep diving deep.